Okay, hello and welcome everybody to Exploratorium Berlin, live here at the venue and also via live stream. My name is Mathias Maschat and I'm happy about my guests today, Alexander von Schlippenbach, Rieko Okuda and Ignaz Schick. I decided to basically do this talk in English since Alexander Markvart doesn't speak German, and I would like to say hello to Alexander Markvart in St. Petersburg. Yeah, but we said it's also okay to express things in German or to ask questions in German. That's also possible, and we do a little bit of translation and we deal with a eventually bilingual situation. We'll see. Yeah, so Alexander Markvart cannot be here. There were some troubles with artist visa coming from St. Petersburg, so I'm happy that it works well up till now that we have him in a video meeting with us tonight.
I'm happy to.
Okay, so our talk today is entitled, just wait a moment, please. Our talk is entitled Echtzeitmusik Generations, and it is the second part of a series of talks that I'm setting up together with Ignaz and also with Burkhard Beins, who's also here, and with Andrea Neumann, who are all influential musicians and also co-founders, one could say, of the first Echtzeitmusik generation, to already use this term directly. The idea to talk about different generations of Echtzeit musicians came from Ignaz Schick, who also proposed to invite the three guests, Rieko, Alexander, and Sascha. There's so much to say about the four of them, so that I have to restrict myself to some only very basic info. We have piano icon of European free jazz, Alexander von Schlippenbach. He has been in Berlin since the 1960s, and he had already shaped and experienced Berlin free music for over 20 years when the first protagonists arrived who would later establish Echtzeitmusik in Berlin. Ignaz Schick, he got active in Berlin since around 1990, and as I said, he belongs to the founding generation of Echtzeitmusik, both as an influential musician but also as an organizer. Rieko Okuda, she's also a pianist. She came to Berlin in the year 2011 from Japan, but then from the US, first from Japan, then to the US, and then to Berlin. And she has quickly established herself with her enormously wide musical spectrum in very different scenes, and she has since then been also omnipresent in both longer existing and also in newly founded venues. And then we have multi-instrumentalist Alexander Markvart. He is a musician, member of theater projects and organizer of events and festivals based between Berlin and St. Petersburg. He has been in Berlin since 2018, and with his fresh and original approaches as co-operator and co-curator of the Petersburg art space, he has quickly become a constant in Berlin, also setting up really a lot of concerts here. So I don't want to talk too long in the beginning, and I would like to directly start with our conversation. So Ignaz, I'm asking you first. Since it was you proposing all this, how did you come up with the idea to talk about Echtzeitmusik generations, and what was your interest in bringing up this topic?
Maybe because when I started playing this kind of music, I was mostly surrounded by elders who were already very established in the aesthetic and what they were doing, and there's different waves of people who were quite influential, and it was not so easy actually then when starting my own practice to find a spot, because like let's say, the music was defined and where, like, so I had very early on in Berlin, my first question is like, who is my generation? Who are these people? And they kind of arrived at the same time when I did. And that was like, let's say, from the studying moment where you learn with the elders and they kind of pass on information. Then I had the feeling, okay, this is the history, this is where it comes from, but where am I myself as an artist? And that was very helpful actually at that moment. I think it was just luck that all these young players, I was still the younger one, they were all a little older, but they all more or less arrived at the same time. And we had like similar questions, I would say. Not yet answers, but questions. And it was very helpful to experiment with them and then find something. And then I noticed in all these waves in Berlin we had that there was new generations arriving. We had a joke at some moment, it's not about how old you are, it's more when you arrived in Berlin. And but I recently noticed that there's a strong shift taking place with, again, younger players. And I find that very interesting, and so I thought it could be really nice to have some of the, from now my perspective, younger generation, but also somebody from those people who really started it in Berlin, and that's for sure Alex and Sasha and Rieko kind of for me represent this new generation who are also questioning a lot with how they play what we do, and I find this very refreshing, and so that's how I came up with this idea. It could be a nice discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Ignaz. So it's also about aesthetic preferences, aesthetic considerations, and one basic question would be for us today how the time in which one arrives in the city kind of influences the aesthetic decisions also. And as you said, it is really a question when all the places are already taken, where to position yourself. So as I said before when we talked, we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. How can we find our own way as artists to do something new, to do something original, and in what way? Talking about generation, the idea is it a concept of conflict, or is it a concept of continuity? It can be both, I guess. And so this would be the questions that we want to talk about today. My idea was maybe to start with a kind of chronological thing. So, Alex, I would like to ask you, how was the situation in the 60s when you started to play free music? What has been the circumstances of time that made you play this music?
Yes, I think, the emergence of free jazz, end of the 50s already, and from the 60s on, was a real new development in the history of jazz. You can compare this maybe to the things that happened to European composed or serious music, or how you call it, at the beginning of the last century. So a very big change in the musical language, new ideas and new forms, and this happened to jazz, roughly speaking, 60 years later, about. So I was there from beginning on, I can say, because we started, I had my first musical time, not in Berlin, but in Cologne. And Cologne at this time was, I think, maybe almost the most important town for new music in whole Europe, because there was the WDR, Westdeutscher Rundfunk, with all equipments for electronic music as well, and all many of the contemporary composers, the important composers of this time, used to teach in Cologne as well. And there were 3 schools, die Hochschule für Musik, Konservatorium and Rheinische Musikschule, and Berio, Kaskel, Stockhausen, Zimmermann. They were all visited there from time to time. So there was really many things were happening. And in jazz, it was up to this point the normal places, good places, where we used to listen to the great American musicians. I remember one night we could listen to Rollins and Horace Silver in one setup in the place. So there was really something going on, and there were also a lot of was one special place we used to have jam sessions with the musicians from the radio orchestra. They came there every night. So up to this point, we used to play more or less only the American repertoire of songs from the musicals and so well-known, Cole Porter and Rodgers and Hart and this kind of stuff. But we were also listening very eagerly to new records coming from America, and we used to buy them immediately, and it was the time when we heard first time Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Cecil Taylor, Monk even before, of course, and we have been really very strong into the bebop style. We chose desperately to play bebop, and then there were some new influences coming from American musicians, of the progressive musicians, and free jazz anyway. It came actually from America, like all jazz. So it was very quickly adapted in the in Europe by some younger musicians, especially from Germany, from England and Holland. I remember that was the first activities, and we tried to get into new forms and also language of music. So it came very strong from the music itself. It was free jazz was also mentioned many times in combination with the political implications of that time. I think it's, of course, there is something to say about this as well, but it was, from my opinion, it was too overrated. I think it came actually more from the music itself, a kind of necessary development that was now came into creation of the younger musicians of this time. So this was the situation.
And what made you move to Berlin then?
This was it was a kind of personal thing, and
okay.
Doesn't have to do much with music. But I can say I came back at the right time to Berlin in beginning of the 70s, because this was the time when the free music production, you heard about that? Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore, but there was a real successful attempt to get better organized also in professional ways. So there were concert series set up, there was efforts to press out money from the cultural administrations to make self-organized workshops, especially in Wuppertal at this time, because there was, between Cologne and Wuppertal was a very interesting relation, because in the Cologne, people like Manfred Schof and Gerd Dudek and myself, we came more maybe what they would call an academic side, because we studied music in Cologne, composition myself, and Schof and trumpet and so. But the Wuppertalers, they had more this political attitude and ideas within their music. So anyway, we met, and my first community orchestra in 1966 was based on a combination of these two groups, the Peter Brötzmann trio and the Schoof's quintet, and I had the idea to make this piece. So this was, roughly speaking, the whole situations in the beginning of the 60s and beginning of this, and through the 70s and 80s. I think FMP, the Free Music Production, did a very, very successful work in Berlin, because every year there were two things happening. There was a workshop of free music in the Academy of Arts, and the Total Music Meeting, which was happening, which was set up at the same time when the Berlin Festival was going on. And then after the festival was happening in the Philharmonie, we went on later in the Quartier Latin with the Total Music Meeting. There was always something happening. Yeah.
So it was basically about finding the right people at the right time, and also about building your own structures with the FMP, for example.
Please say
it was basically about finding the right people in the
Yeah.
right time,
Yeah.
and also about finding good conditions. For example, like founding FMP and organizing the festival, Total Music Meeting, and so on. Yeah.
No, it was actually very important to meet, like you said, the right people at the right time, and I got in connection with Schoof and Dudek, and we immediately started to play together and made a group and did some work already. And also the guys from Wuppertal, they were also quite active, and so the combination was happening, and the scene was made up in Germany, mainly by these two centers.
So we can say that this is really also what characterized free music in Berlin. I mean, it was a lot around the scene of FMP. There were also meetings with the East Berlin scene. There were also strong connections between the West and the East scene. This was what made the whole.
Yeah, I can say also, if it's okay,
Yeah.
something more about this meeting with the guys from East Berlin. It was the first time. I think it was already in the beginning of the 60s, of the 70s. And there was one place in East Berlin, this was called the Melodie Bar. Yeah? And the guys from East Germany, like Petrovsky and Klaus Koch, Uli Gumpert, Conny Bauer, and so, they used to make sessions. And somehow we could get in connection with them. I don't know exactly when it happened, but we got in connection, and then it came to happen that we could go there by invitation until 12 o'clock in the night. So we went there and met them in the Melodie Bar, second floor, old billiard room, piano, and we used to have sessions as much as possible, especially in this time when the jazz festival was going on. But, of course, there was a relationship that went on, and later we made a lot of tours in the DDR. But it has to be always one guy from another country. They didn't like East and West German combinations. So when I played, for example, I had a trio with Baby Sommer, Evan Parker, and myself. But we had to take Evan Parker as one guy should be there from another country. There was also, always also some friend of helpers. They went with us by car, but we knew exactly they wanted just to listen if there was some conspiration going on, and they didn't like that. And this hasn't really to do so much with the music, but I think we had a very good and strong relation with them, much more than now, I think, actually.
So maybe this was the beginning of the very strong international connections of the free music scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Ignaz, you came to Berlin after the fall of the wall, and which situation did you find there? I mean, you already started a little bit to talk about it, but maybe you can go more into detail.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised in Bavaria on a farm, but it was also very strongly influenced by the post-68, or let's say student political times. My parents witnessed that and decided to go, like when my brother was born, not to stay in Berlin, but to go to the countryside. And it was this area where there was a lot of alternative places, communes. And and so the setting was there more that art was there at these places, and sometimes music, not so much at my house, but a friend of the family introduced me basically to free jazz or jazz. He took me to a festival and I bumped into some musicians and got really into it. But there was not many people playing there, so it was kind of like everything by records as well. Like I put on free jazz records and played along to learn, because people were, if you were lucky and they were playing jazz, it was jazz standards. But there was a very good music school in Austria, and so that was kind of like the studying years parallel to finishing my school. But then when I came to Berlin, I was very hungry to hear this music I knew from records live. And I remember the first time I came was 90, because I also wanted to see East Berlin before it would change. And I arrived together with a trombone player not so many people know now. He was a friend from France, a trombone player called Marc Bokuya. We had a duo since I was like 16, and he would introduce me to Anthony Braxton, and then we would like rehearse such material. And we went together, and he could stay because I still had to finish the school. But he stayed in Berlin and he got very involved already. And I had to finish school, so there was a gap again. And then finally I resettled here in 95. But I had already like projects going with people like Bob Rudman, Jason Kahn, Stephen Garling. And right after the wall, I also saw a Total Music meeting at the Podeville, at Haus der, it was still called Haus der Jungen Talente. I still remember it was 3 saxophones, 3 basses, 3 drums. And it's a bit hard to describe. Like, I mean, Mark and me were quite welcomed at the time by the East German musicians. Like Conny Bauer was really coming, like we sent postcards. We had a concert and we sent postcards to everybody, but only the East German musicians showed up. Actually, I don't know why, but so there showed up Hannes Bauer, Conny Bauer, Ulrich Petrowski, Uschi Brüning, and they were really excited. They said, "Wow, this is so nice that there is young musicians." And then I think Mark stayed, and he immediately was involved in a lot of projects. But I think from that moment on, like year by year, new musicians arrived. Like Axel arrived short after. Andrea Neumann was already here, and by 95, when I moved, it was again at the Total Music meeting. There was this Butch Morris Berlin Skyscraper, and that was the first time that I think I felt, okay, there is now a whole stage full of musicians from my generation. I remember there was Stefan Mathieu, Gregor Hotz, Michael Griener, Axel was playing, Mark was playing, and that kind of for me felt like a transition point. And I met Joost. He was very friendly, but also selective. So I had the feeling it was not so easy to get into it, actually. And
Joske was
who run FMP, like he was observing, but it was also clear that it's, they picked Axel and a few people, but it was clear that there would not be an open door. I was a bit surprised, actually, but we were also very young. But there were all these squads. That was another situation in parallel. So also when I came the first time, I stayed in a squad in Friedrichshain, and so there were all these spaces, basically, which were also not so defined. Like sometimes there was maybe a punk bar evening, but it was often not used. And so there were several spots where actually meeting points. One of the most important, I think, was Anorak, where every Sunday there was a concert and all the younger musicians would gather there. And it was also very undefined musically. It was very open. It was not yet focused. Most of us weren't focused. Some were very influenced by English, by the English school. Others were very much into this downtown New York thing. Again, others were very influenced by what we called the FMP style. And it only started then that people were, like, I felt like discussing and meeting and rehearsing and yeah, so. And also not to forget another place, I think, which was quite important, was Jazz Keller in Treptow, because they had the Thursday sessions, which I often played in the beginning. It was another meeting point. And then slowly, all these people who are still here arrived at different times and started to connect and meet up. And also life was very cheap, so it wasn't such a big problem if you were not immediately paid like a good fee, because you could easily survive. Like, I still remember playing, like, basking in the daytime and then going at night, like playing in the subway, and then that was enough money to survive, and then at night go to the jam session or meet musicians and play. And yeah, it's kind of roughly how it started, and then it went through different periods of also the self-organizing. I think there's a lot of parallels, actually, in a way, maybe not musically, but like how Alex said, like meeting the right people in the right moment, but then also this, like, not waiting for somebody to invite you, but say, okay, then let's organize ourselves and organize concerts or festivals or labels. And that's still the same. Like, I think there's a lot of self-organization in the scene.
Yeah, so there were a lot of open spaces, of course, due to the political changes, and so really a lot of possibilities, because it was easy to find places also to get together and to play together. Rieko, how was the situation for you when you came to Berlin? I mean, now we have at least already 2 generations of free music players who had established themselves. Mm-hmm. How did you hear from all this in the States, and what did you make to come to Berlin?
So I came to Berlin in 2011. Before, I was studying in United States, in Philadelphia. I was like, luckily I met so many great musicians there, like Marshall Allen, I played with him, and also Calvin Weston or Elliot Lavins, and those people I played with. In United States, I hear many great stories about it in jazz scenes, but in Philadelphia there was like 3 venues that we could play like free standards, how to say? It's a kind of standards, but it's like free way of standard. We can go anywhere, but we start from head and then go free, and then we somehow end with some melody and stuff. And but then in Philadelphia, there's 3 venues, but at the end of the 2010, I think there was a really nice venue called Triton. I really liked it, but everybody says like that's the really, how to say, low-key place or something like this, but they are so open for everything. You can do basically anything there. So I really liked it, the place, but they had to close it because of like the United States has so big stream of mainstream jazz, I had to say more Brad Melda or all those kind of people that, I mean, they have their own voice also, I respect, whatever, but it's just a little bit different way of probably expressing or different way of living or philosophy somehow. And so the Triton ended, I thought like, okay, this is no more. I can't live in. I also lived in New York in 6 months, but it was so insanely expensive that you cannot live. It's so crazy, and the venues and jam sessions, and I had gigs, but gigs are paid like $75, and the rent is like super small and already $750 or something. We are like sharing for 5 people. And so that, like, how? Like, I had to have so many gigs, but there are so many great musicians that, so I cannot get so much gigs. So I thought, I wanted to also come to Europe to see how is the music stream going here. And I decided to travel around in Europe. I went to France, I went to Copenhagen, I went to Berlin, and other places. And Berlin was crazy that immediately, that was 2010, but immediately I could find really interesting people. And that moment I felt like people are really open also for the new people to come in. And I could find a lot of venues doing very interesting movements. And so I decided to come right after I graduated from university. I decided to come to Berlin, and I already had a contact with Klaus Kubers also, and or I knew Clean Feed also, and yeah, beginning 2011, I came. I didn't know so many musicians, but I did a lot of sessions with those great musicians already established and all this stuff. But at the same time, I met the first person was Utku Tawil. It was funny because there's a venue called Couscous Küche, which is actually, now I'm living there. But the place is no more there. But they put it to find a musician in the Iwe Kleinanzeigen. And then Utku and me actually applied for this, both. I didn't know Utku, but then I met Utku, and then so we started to, we started playing more like free jazz kind of style of more free things, and then, but we all studied jazz and stuff, so style of jazz, and then, but then Utku started doing this multiversal, which is more really with Dario Fariello and Utku Tawil. I think they are the main guys started, but also there was the association called RPT, which is from France, Nancy, Thibaut and Kevin, Rubin, those really like, they also came to Berlin at the same time around 2011. It's just like so many bunch of people who is 2011 came, had a certain energy to create a new session doing calling by multiversal. So I met them really first moment when I came to Berlin. So I could join to this sessions. I think they started in Warschau Strasse, in the Keller, and also I think there was Els was renting the space and all those.
Els van der Weyer.
Yeah, Els van der Weyer. Yeah, and I don't know, met Teresa or Stella Voce. She's a cello player, but she's not playing. She's more composing stuff now. Miriam Jivenstadt, now John Park, her name. She changed name. But all those people, we could gather there every week, and more or less we had a lineup to like kind of organized, but we meet and everybody can join every week, do more noisy stuff. It's real not like kind of more noise, music, and or whatever you want. Actually, can be quiet, anything. And then from there, it started being in the multiversal, and I think this went to like European like whole things. They're really moving a lot. They organized in also like of course France because of RPT guys, and Copenhagen or Netherlands or even Turkey or Greece. They sometimes just drive to there, and it's very low key, very like. But it has certain energy to moving forward in this time, and yeah, and we had also like 78 hours of full concerts, like non-stop, and all those things we did it, and that's that was how it is, and now maybe Sasha is now, I think. But yeah,
maybe just one question. I mean, how much have you been aware of the other generations who had been in Berlin already? So the free jazz musicians from the 70s and 80s, and then also the Echtzeit musicians from the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
Has this already played a role, or was it more important to really meet the new people and to start completely new things?
No, I think it's both for me. It was really both important. Of course, I guess Ignaz doesn't remember, but I met his concert. I saw his concert. I haven't talked to him after that or anything because I felt very new. Or Burkhard also. I went to Quiet Q, or also NK was here, Ausland, of course, and all those venues, all the I went to listen to the concert, but to have the sessions and all that. I mean, everybody's open. Ignaz is really open. Burkhard super open, of course. Alexander probably open. Sorry, we are same instruments, so I never talked to you. But I think, but I didn't specifically ask because I was a little bit, I thought like, okay, I had to a bit more learn about the scene. And but of course, as a music-wise, I went to the concert, I got so much inspirations from there. But at the same time, I really thought also, venue had a, like color, I'd say. Venue has the sound color somehow. So it's really new things to make. Our own sound was also very important space. This Warsaw was also very important space from the old venues that I could get inspirations to put it out. Yeah, I don't know. I hope everybody understands.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So, Sasha, you run Petersburg Art Space. Since when does it exist? You are there since 2018, right? Is it?
Yeah. Petersburg Art Space exists since 2017, and 1 year it was different organizers there, and not so many concerts. It was like monthly parties. And yeah, since 2018, Alexei invited me to create the space. And yeah, it was 2018. But the first time I was in Berlin, 2013. I played once. in quiet queue. So I met Berlin in 2013, and then I always I had some tours in Europe every year, and all the time I came to Berlin, but not played so many concerts actually. But all the time I spent like few days in Berlin, and I went to the different concerts. Just I opened the echtzeitmusik website and choose every day where I go to listen. Yeah. But it's I wanted to tell the story about how I came to Berlin and how Berlin came to Kemerovo, my original town. So I grew up in Siberia, and of course there is no scene of such kind of music, any types of free jazz, any types of free music. So no people actually who played there. And for me, everything was so no teachers, no people with whom you can speak. But I listened a lot, and I listened to all, I think, participants of this conversation before I met on CDs or Ruth Reker, do you know these pirates from Russia? Yeah, and so I listened a lot, and I decided to try to play some free music in Kemerovo, and I started to organize things there, and then I met some people, so we had a small community between several cities in Siberia, and we played kind of free music. It was really wild and really. It wasn't like free jazz or free improvisation. It was mix of everything, because people who was involved to this scene was from different scenes as well, like from rock music, from folk music, from classical music as well. And then so we started to organize a festival. It was twice. It was a local festival, and in 2012. So I organized already like international festival, and in 2013 I invited people from Berlin first time. So it was my connection first actually in Kemerovo. It was Joel Grip and Pierre Borel. They came to Kemerovo and lost a little bit. Yeah, and also, so I started to connect it with people from Europe in Kemerovo, and at the same time, I went first time to Europe to play music, and it was a very important moment. And so a few years I organized this festival, and so I had more and more connections. And for me, when I came to Berlin in 2018, and we started. This Petersburg art space. So for me, actually, it was quite easy to find the connections in the scene, and it was completely different generations for me. So I met some young people whom I never know, and of course I met a lot of great musicians, which I listened a lot in the previous times. This is the story for me, short story, how I came to Berlin, and now I'm talking about echtzeitmusik generations.
Yeah,
do you hear me?
Yeah, all good. We hear you perfectly. Yeah, thank you. Which kind of concerts have you been setting up at Petersburg Art Space then? It's also a variety of concerts, one can say, maybe.
Yeah, it's different concerts, and we also have some not only music. We have also dance movement series. Jessica Gaynor is curating this, and but it's also connected with musicians, and yeah, we actually, I'm in Petersburg Art Space, and I'm open for. It wasn't like a strict direction, like okay, we are doing only only this kind of improvised music. So it's very open. And but the first concert I set up in Petersburg Art Space, it was my duo with Axel Dörner, and actually 2 people came, so it was a great start for me in Petersburg Art Space. But after 2 months, it was few concerts, and Ignaz played first time in Petersburg. It was quite a lot of people, so we people start to know the place, and we start to book more and more. And actually, I think it's really nice that some new places also open all the time in Berlin. It's really like organized, not established. Like, okay, we have only Ausland, Labor Sonor, Exploratorium, and this, but also it's all the time changing. It's also important to develop the scene, I think.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, it really depends also on the venues that are present at certain times. It's always a pity when venues have to close, but we can expect that other venues, new venues are going to open and something new is going to happen like this. Yeah, you were mentioning Axel Dörner, who is maybe interesting in this context tonight, because he's been playing a lot with Alex. He's in the Monks Casino group, for example, and he belongs to the founding generation of Echtzeitmusik together with Ignaz also. Then he also played with you. I don't know about your connections. I guess they are there. So yeah, it's not about age, as we said before, but also about a kind of adaptability to play with really a lot of different persons, and this for sure is also simply a quality of all this style, that this is possible. I think it's really extraordinary that in improvised music and in free jazz we have this a possibility to really connect in big networks and to simply play together, no matter how old you are and where exactly you come from, which nationality you are. But this is offered by this kind of music. That maybe this generational aspect is not always so central. Is that your experience too?
It's a question to me, or
Ignaz, maybe.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Or Alex? Or
Yeah.
No, definitely. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, Alex.
At this point, I think, because talking about what you call Echtzeitmusik and free jazz, I think there's something to distinguish. It's not that easy that you can say it's easy to combine it. It's the same. I think the free jazz musicians has a different approach to the music, basically, that comes from jazz. And as far as I know, I have to say I am a free jazz musician. I think I'm not belonging to Echtzeit so much. Please correct me when I have create a misunderstanding or have a misunderstanding. I don't have anything to say against, yes? I just like to say it is different, I think. Axel is an interesting, you mentioned Axel Dörner. Yeah? He's an interesting example for a crossover, a successful crossover man, because he is an excellent jazz musician and he has developed things on his instrument that goes already in the direction of noise, but even in this field you can distinguish qualities, yes? And also quality is another point that has to be discussed. I mean, you can play, if the right musicians come to play echtzeitmusik, which is more improvised without any ambition to bring your personality very strong out. But in free jazz, I think in jazz, mainly the importance is focused on the personality of the player. Yeah? And if the Echtzeit, they have to create something together by taking the personality a bit more back. Is it? Please.
I don't know.
It's a very interesting view, because I mean, actually, within the 30 years, there's of course different, how I say, like let's say times or styles within the scene. But I would completely agree, especially for the early days, that also that was often in the discussion. That's why I think people came up with a different name also, because they didn't want to associate with flow or emotion or
emotionless, we used to say.
You used to say this, I know. Yeah, but it was more like abstraction of the sounds also, which were playing an important role at the time. But I think within the years it has changed again a lot.
How do you think now?
Yeah. Well,
I really want to ask about this. How do you think now about this echtzeitmusik?
No, I mean, I don't really think at all that there's a style, because people, like, we had Axel, but you can name so many others, are involved with different kinds of music, and there was this extreme phase, I would say, where it, like, music was, the scope was pretty narrow, but then with all these people arriving, like, I don't know, it's the same for Tony Buck or for any musician from the scene. They're involved in so many different things. So you can hear one night Tony playing with the Necks or with some free jazz musicians, and then the next night you can hear him in a super abstract setting. Yeah. And it's the same with me. Like, I switch from playing saxophone in a classic trio format to noise music to something which sounds more contemporary. So in that sense, I know there's a lot of different views and opinions, but I always oppose the idea that Echtzeit is a style.
This is also getting questioned. I also beginning when I came here, I thought there is certain style, even like 2011. Like I see that point absolutely how you said, and but now when I check the calendar, echtzeitmusik, then who's playing, and all the musicians are so diverse, and also, like also I said that before, when I came in 2011, the venue had a certain color. I felt like it's like strength, how to say that, but now I also feel like venue also has more diverse colors too as a musician, so that's why I'm really myself also I really wanted to ask everybody like how is it like echtzeitmusik. I also don't see that style anymore. How to say it's a real like now time who is now playing their voice kind of thing.
I think there's a lot of parallel things going on, and I mean there was a period definitely, I mean, where even musicians who came from outside and visited thought that there is a certain style, and they tried to adapt, and then even us were like, what's going on, why are they trying to play like what they think is now the code? And I mean there was this very reduced phase, definitely
the phase, I think.
But it was, and that was very strongly informed by some forms or ideas which came out of contemporary music. So, but for me personally, that was never more important than, let's say, also the influences I got from early downtown New York stuff, which already brought in the noise element, or like how Alex very nicely described Axel's work. So that was always in parallel also happening, that I wouldn't say emotionless music because
Sorry about that.
no, that's fine. It's just maybe different emotions. But I remember like I think abstract music can also get very emotional, but maybe infused from different sources, like not only the jazz. I mean that I would say, yeah. I mean many of us come out of the jazz background, but then in what it turned, I would say there was more influence from, let's say, contemporary music or electroacoustic music or noise music than maybe from free jazz. But that has changed with you guys again, because then you brought back in things which we went away from. So that's why I find it interesting, or why I ask you also to be here.
Yeah, okay.
The general idea is improvised music,
Yeah.
and jazz is something different.
Yeah.
I think it belongs, because improvisation is the main thing. Yeah?
Exactly.
But improvisation is such a big thing to talk about, and depends if it's related to something relative or totally free, which doesn't exist actually, because every improvisation is conditioned by certain circumstances and certain basic conditions.
Yeah.
This is another thing.
Yeah. But sometimes comes this question, so what in the end is Echtzeitmusik? And then I have to admit that it's improvisation mostly. So it's
improvised music. That's what they say.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the last talk that we had together, where Andrea was also questioning if we still need the term Echtzeitmusik.
Yeah. I don't think so. It's a nice website.
Nice website, actually, yeah.
And of course, I mean, the limits are not so clear. There is something that switches over there, and the influences from there, and of course, more or less different strong developments in different fields. But it has to do, it's basically improvisation. This is the great thing.
I have a question for you, Alex. Like, how was it when you guys started out? Like, was there a lot of opposition from the generation before, or from the jazz people who were more playing straight? Like, that would be interesting for me to hear.
Yes, of course. There was a very established jazz scene in Cologne, especially. All these musicians from the radio orchestra, great players like Derek Humble, Jimmy Duca, and whatever, they came to jam with us, and they had their own idea how it should be played. There was no space for experiments or something. And we just, as from a younger generation, tried to hang out with them and have a chance to play with them in a small club. This was the thing. And when this first emergence of what they later call free jazz came up, there was already a very strong reaction against and very excited about it. And of course, from these more established musicians, they were critical about it. Because suddenly all they have learned so much their life and get a successful thing going on was attacked by something of that. And of course there was a reaction on this, and you could feel it, but at the same time it was also something that gave the new thing a kind of special push. Now we know we have to do something, and a feeling of we found something which is done by ourselves. It's not a borrowed music from some. These were the terms that were used, like we play only American jazz, we play only the pieces we copy. We used to copy the whole records of Jazz Messengers and Horace Silver Quintet. But this was suddenly not happening anymore, and the musicians found own forms. We used to, for example, inspired by Ornette Coleman, we used to invent short pieces, sometimes just a few motifs, and we use this as a kind of initial push to go somewhere. No changes, no fixed tempo, no metron, but kind of flow should come up. And when this happened, we felt it works, as we used to say. But this was, of course, a difficult process. It was not easy to get through, really. Even so, there was a big excitement about it. And the critics used to fight each other a lot in print. And there was one very, very interesting, spectacular thing I like to mention. Maybe you know about that. There was a television production in 1967. And there was the Peter Bretzmann trio with Aldo Romano and Kowald and Klaus Doldinger's quartet. They were set up in opposite. And there were about 10 critics, known people of that time, like Schmidt, Joos, or Olshausen, Werner Burkhard, and they have been sitting all there, kind of right and left wing even came out. It was funny. It was really funny. And then Bretzmann played, and they tried to challenge him by some questions. And the more conventional and older guy asked him, Mr. Bretzmann, what is your system when you play? A musician must have a system. Yeah? Every musician has a certain system he works on and he plays. And Bretzmann, he hesitated for a minute and said, the system is me, he said. This was his answer. It was a good answer. Huh? Right. So the guy was a bit shocked. And then he, another thing also made a good figure. It's more like funny. Later, Doldinger had to play with his... Bretzmann's trio, really, they played quite well, I have to say. I remember that. It was one of the earlier things. It was 1967. Yeah. And then Doldinger was coming on stage, well dressed, smoking, tuxedo, everything. And they played a kind of very good and perfect kind of mainstream thing, a little bit more already in kind of rocky also at this time. It was not really so much as it was kind of blues thing. And then Doldinger liked, Bretzmann was also there, and he wanted to challenge Bretzmann and told him, now you see, he took the saxophone and did some weird sounds, something else. I can do that anytime, but I like to play you a little blues or a kind of little standard tune. You should do that now, and I would like to hear. And then Bretzmann said, of course he could never do that, but he gave a brilliant answer. He said, I don't think it fits really my role I have to do here, and what my message I have to say. I don't like to irritate by doing this now, so I think better we leave that. So Doldinger was quite angry, but Bretzmann was cool, and I think he did right. He did right. He did not, ließ sich nicht vorführen, sozusagen. So just to say how much against and for the thing, the sympathy and the antipathy and hate even and everything, love, everything.
Yeah, so when we talk about generations, the differences not necessarily have to be between generations, if they are. they can be in the same generation,
Yeah.
and we know this all too well, I think.
I can
And-
say one word.
Yeah, Alex.
A general difference, sometimes mentioned, is the musicians of my generation. Yeah, we in our young days had to be against a lot, against political things, against the society, against everything, against our parents and so. But the new generation now, the third generation, they are very good established in the social context, consents, right? Good schools established. Jazz at my time was still a kind of bit doubtful things in the society. So we had to be against. And now they are more well situated. It doesn't have to be with the quality of music, but most of them, because very good education in the music school, even play much better the instrument on certain terms, yeah. But what I want to say, this is a kind of different. Yeah, you should maybe realize more against and more now fit together with everything. It's not. It's maybe not 100% like this. There is a new generation also. They have to fight a lot about their own things, but this is not. It is not the guys who went to the school so much. It's more kind of activities from their own intentions. They are there as well.
Rieko, what's your idea about that?
I don't.
Your experience right now.
Yeah, I felt like, I mean, probably socially, maybe, I don't know, it's a different kind of against.
Yeah.
I really feel like it's the time, so the society pressure or I feel like our age is different also.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
it
generation.
in the 60s. It was this time when
you're
we've been against everything.
Yeah, but now also
It's
like
completely different. It's another situation. You cannot even compare so much.
But now also, like as you said, like okay, maybe it's more everything's maybe some kind of harmony or something. But at the same time, we also realize it's something we have to push.
Yeah.
So some of the people, like I don't want to say like generation, but like new people, like when I come to Berlin 2011, I think there are some people actually pushing their musical directions or what they want to say to the society or in their way. I think they do, but it's not, I'd say, it's really, for those kind of music, I had to say it's very hard to get the funding or get the place to play, or it's very hard to. Society made us more, maybe different kind of pressure. I'm not so.
I also, sorry, I wanted to add a little bit.
Please, Sasha.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit about this question about against. It's also the reason why so many musicians in this way, in this kind of music, they are trying to go to Berlin. Because now, yes, it's more or less harmony in Berlin. It's a great scene, and everyone wants to join this and to have experience in Berlin. But actually, it's a lot of against in all the world. So that's why people wants to come for better, for not conditions, but how to say, I mean, with this kind of music in my town, I'm always was against, like, because people don't understand, so people don't like this. And of course, we had audience also from young people. I want to just add this, that also the reason why people come to Berlin now.
Yeah, we also have to say that the circumstances of time can be very different depending on the place where you are on Earth. So what you've been talking about the 60s, for example, in Europe and the US, for example, can be very different for an experience in the Arabic world, for example, right? So we always have to connect the time also to the space. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. But we can talk about it in a way because our cultural background is this word here.
Yeah, I completely agree, because we sometimes tend to look at things from our perspective, but there's all these like Southeast Asian scenes coming up recently, and if we then just shift this, like how you said in the Arab world, or if we let's just look at Myanmar. I was there 2 years ago, and there was a prospering scene, and now they're all fighting and trying to get their freedom back from the coup which happened, or Hong Kong suddenly losing the freedom. So I think we must be careful here. Like, I mean, it's true maybe for my generation, I can say probably I'm the first generation in Germany for a long time who didn't experience war. I mean, you probably still remember from childhood the war situation. My parents were experiencing after war situation, so it was all still very strongly, how we say, defined by that. And in the 90s, I think if I look at it, it's a different kind of, like if we look at the money capitalist system, then more indirectly, I think that's what I feel that my generation tries to resist with this music also, because it's still like, when you decide for this kind of music, you know you will never really earn money. And then if you decide for your life, that for me is also a fight to say, okay, I'm not changing my music because of commercial reasons. I don't agree with the commercial system. But it's much more easy, of course. In Berlin, it's a bubble, of course. But once you leave Berlin, you play outside. In Germany, there's suddenly not many places left. And it's also going to be very different for the very young generation who are starting now, because they're going to face really a lot of other issues, which we have all this debate about climate, about migration. So I think there's going to be quite turbulent times coming up. So I guess every generation has this, how you say, fights.
Yeah, I think,
but they are just always looking a little different.
Yeah. I think every time has a different against to we have to push the scene and ourselves also. I mean, also if I talk about Japan, and that's great music underground scene, but of course, no one can live with this. No way. There's no way of it. It's insane. Also, United States, when I was living there, it's really... So Berlin's open, but at the same time, still, I feel like to be in the scene took, for me, a lot of time still. So I have to kind of be... I'm not against, how to say, it's hard to put it in a word right now, but it's really, it took really for me, I guess 3-4 years to get into, I know a lot of people, I know all the people, but I also have to push myself to be in the society somehow. I'm also Auslander, I think for you too. I mean, we both have already the problem to stay here. That's the first thing we have to fight. and it's getting more and more difficult situation because like said like migrations and all that. It's yeah, I understand everybody has that situation, and then we also have like to be here is we already have to show, and every year more and more capital way of living. I have to say it's really changing a lot. In that way, we also really have to fight in the scene also, I feel like sometimes, to live. So
may I just ask you, you mean like every year you have to prove more income to get the visa?
Yeah, every year more than like really every year more. And especially there was, it's not good or bad, nothing like this, but the migration thing happened. That year gets really crazy. Like they really crazy started like pushing out the people.
Like 2015, basically.
Yeah. It's like a lot of people got pushed out. So like we really have to fight for this. I just don't understand why we cannot live where we want. But it's a still I have to say it's a privilege to live in Berlin, because it's still much easier if we talk about Paris. If we want to live in Paris, there's no way. I cannot probably go. Also United States. At the end also, of course, the music scene was getting like more and more suppressed from the government. You can't do this kind of music. Or no one comes to the showing up, so the displays have to close and everything happened. So there was at the end, there was only one jazz club in Philadelphia when I was there. So, but at the same time, to stay in the United States, for me, I really, really had to have a lot of money to be there. There's no way. So I have to do student again, or there's like something that, always I have to fight for.
So this is also a kind of generational aspect, I would say. I mean, when something happens like more restrictions for migration, this also affects the international musicians of the scene, which is something new. I mean, it will be harder to get in and to be here, to join the scene in a way. Yeah. I think Ignaz wanted to react to this.
No, it's at least something where what I said before, like we should be careful not always to see things from our perspective, because for us it's granted as German musicians. I only noticed it the more I traveled, like, I don't know, entering Australia or entering the US, or last year I got deported from the US for just going there to play. And then you realize, oh, wait a second, this is what my Mexican colleagues in Berlin or the Japanese colleagues, and we tend to forget this. So it's like, I mean, we are like all really happy about this fact that the scene is so international and there's so many amazing people coming from all over, but we tend to forget how hard it is for them. I mean, some people like Sasha is not here, so and this is something Berlin always says. Oh yeah, we are this great international city of artists, and I mean it is much easier, I think, to get the visa here, the artist visa, than probably in London or in Paris, sure, yeah. Or here from Paris. That it's very hard. But I think this is something. It's still like kind of once you witness, because it's very existential. Like, I mean, you have your life here, so what happens if you don't get the visa? Or for Sasha, I mean, he's in an in-between state all the time. And I think this is something we should also really address to the politicians. Not just state it, hey, we're so cool, we have all these people, but then also do something for them and support it. But that's also new. I don't know how it was in the 60s, because I remember that West Berlin was a hub for a lot of West Germans who didn't want to join the military, who went to Berlin because they didn't have to have military service. And I know it's always relatively easy for Americans actually to stay here. So it's like just take Mexico and the US, and it's so much harder for a Mexican musician.
Yeah, to get into US.
So it's like kind of like also balancing, or it's like not balancing is the wrong word. It's mirroring what's going on in the world actually. So it's hard for Mexican, it's even harder for African or the Southeast Asian. Like if I invite some Southeast Asian musicians, I have to give guarantees that these people don't stay, and in case they stay, that I take responsibility for them. Like it's a mess if you want to invite a Vietnamese musician. Then you go through it. And so basically we tend to forget this, and I mean it takes us away a bit from generations. It's I think a general question of this balance.
Well, yeah, but I just would recall what Alex has told us about the necessity to always invite a musician from another country so that you don't have only a group consisting of a West and an East German part.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, so each generation has to kind of relate to the political circumstances, really also connected to their own artistic practice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Asking me. Yes, of course. I mean, I already said when the thing really started here in Europe, there were connections very soon with some musicians from Holland, England, and Scandinavia, Italy as well. And it was very important to establish a kind of scene. Yes. And what we have today, I could say in general, it was an underground, and I think our whole scene, if I say, is still underground, but a kind of establishing and even established underground, because now we know we have possibilities to create records, films, everything through the technology anyway, and we have ways. There's even a little market for it, very small and not important, but it exists. Yeah? And there are organizations, there are festivals who are even a bit specialized more what we call now in general now improvised music. So I think this is, of course, quite important for an exchange and encounter, let's say, this funny word, about musicians from other countries as well, and build up the scene and new bands and so on. Yeah.
I would like to go back to one thing. I think we have talked about relation to the past already from Alex's perspective and also from Ignaz's perspective, but I would also like to ask Rieko and Sasha, when you came to Berlin and what you did, is there something which was different to what has been there before? So was there also a kind of distancing or finding new ways from your perspective with the people you've been working with? Maybe Rieko first. No, Rieko.
Musically?
Musically, yeah. Musically.
The approaching differently, you mean?
Yeah, because, I mean, Ignaz said there was this maybe reductionist, more strict phase, one could say, in Berlin, Echtzeitmusik, but then you guys came and related back also to the free jazz movement in a more active way. You know, can you talk a bit about this, maybe?
Yeah. Okay.
Or is it a bit of an artificial question?
No. Maybe Sasha first.
Actually, I don't know what to say about it, but I felt a difference even between 2013 musically. I mean, how I felt the scene, because of course I wasn't in the scene. I just came for a few days and listened a little bit, and how it was in 2018. So even between these like 5 years, It's changing a lot actually now. So
I also now also think like also gender questions are more appearing, and for me it's more also once I had a concerts with like really more like noise or rock or improvisation kind of, and there was a rule. I think why guys can take off the shirts while they're playing, and then girls always having a certain vegetation to it. So we had on that concert we all like take off the shirts. It's like gender thing. It's so stupid to have this thing. And then why you look at the naked thing, like how to say, the women. Like some people look at it different way, you know, like, but it cannot. I mean, we are humans. We are not like men or female. There is also, but we are humans. We are beforehand. So that was what I had a concerts like that, or more gender questions of concerts. A lot of things especially as a woman, I supported, and also I involved too, and or sometimes like not I did, but Utku or RPT people actually went to Charlottenburg with the cars and then opened the door in the car. They had the electricity and then drums and just play loud on the street and just go to that doesn't have to have an audience, or it just doesn't have to organize well or something. It's just we are expressing our voice, like want it here outside. So that was quite like when the Multiverso was going really with RPT and going forward. That movement was quite, I think, gave for me really a lot of inspirations and movement to me to true. I mean, I want to share my music with people, but I don't need a style. I don't have to talk like, I play like this, I play like, no, like at the moment, what I want to share, and then doesn't have to organize. So, I mean, I also appreciate organization, of course, but at the same time, like, why music? What is music? Like, who to share with? It's not for somebody who can come to the concert. We can share with somebody who also, like, in Neukölln, sometimes I also think, like, maybe some young people, or they don't have a chance to come to those kind of concerts. They just don't know sometimes. Then how can we share with those people? Maybe they hate it, but doesn't matter. It's better experience first. So that I really liked it, this movement that we actually did it for the not specific audience or somebody who likes or nothing like this. We really approach to the outside somehow. And of course we have YouTube and everything now, video things, technology, so we are much easier to share, especially also to Japan sometimes. I can collaborate with Japanese musicians via internet and all that, and I can share. But for me, it's the experience with the physical things. If you are there now and we are here now, that's much more important, and that's much more, of course, maybe if you look at the video, you feel like I'm doing something random or something like this, but it has a certain quality at that place and at that moment. I think that's what I want to, or share this thing. So I felt like the 2011, when I came in, and all those generation people has that energy. And then I liked it actually that sometimes Ignaz joined too.
First I checked you guys and I was irritated.
Actually, I wanted to
There was something, I checked you out, everybody, and I was really irritated, I have to say, in the beginning, and it was a very important experience for me, because I was also remembering when I was checked out by the generation before, and then misunderstandings maybe. Because I remember the first multiversals, like having like Utku setting up like, I don't know, 15 sets, and then it's like sometimes just 5 minutes or 15 minutes, and then like in the end of the first night I saw is like, why does this guy not just take the 3 good ones and kick all the other stuff out? I don't need to hear 10 crappy sets to find 3 good ones. But then it took me a while to understand, okay, this is a different approach and a different way of looking at things. And
it's a community, I think.
Well, everything what my generation thought of as interesting or quality was just thrown over. And and it took me a while to appreciate and to understand that maybe it's my mistake.
But I think
it.
But I think it's great. Then after like Ignaz come and play, and now we play together. Also, Burkhard Beins, also and Axel, all those people also coming to join, and then it's such an amazing thing that it's a community at the end. There are so many. Like, I mean, come on! I was playing 48 hours of concerts, and then I played like maybe at 5 a.m. also, and people sleeping around. And then, I played some sleepy song set or something.
Actually, I wanted to add about check-in, about this, to check, because when I came to Berlin, of course, I felt a little bit like, for example, I wrote to Lucio Capice, and okay, let's play together, and he don't know me, and it's like common thing, like, okay, I don't know you, but all people very open, and we just met at his place and played once, and then we played the concert. So it's common thing, but of course it exists. So you come with your music, but Ignaz, for example, don't know my music. It's a simple thing to start to introduce and connect. So
but I don't know. I mean, I still remember when Multiversal started, and it was I really remember this moment of irritation. And
I was wondering how.
but because like suddenly like the payment was already always bad in Berlin, but now it was even worse because it was shared by like you got like sometimes €3.50 instead of like €17 or like but this and also like Utku is somebody who really likes to discuss things and has very strong opinions, and that for me was a moment where I realized, okay, I think we are getting older and there's a shift going on, and
I mean I'm talking about Multiversa. I'm like, I guess of course ask to Utku is the best, because I'm not sorry Utku if it's wrong, but but I really think that I was wondering how it was when it happens, and it's also bad payment, but we really meet. Like, I also met so many great people, great musicians, and amazing. It's always amazing experience, even though they are like, you don't want to hear anymore those music. It's so long sometimes, but still, I mean, this was for me. I think now is more communicative. I think we are trying to establish that it doesn't matter which country it is. We come, you come, and we share, and it doesn't matter generation when you are. We just respect as a musician, and then we share that moment. And maybe there is like more musician than audience, then we get only €2. But still, I think for me, those times those concerts are also great because you can do whatever you want also sometimes. It's just really, you can experiment. You have, now I have this duo, now I have this trio, I'm trying, can I play there? And then they're, yeah, sure, it's okay. That's also the very important moment for me to share that what I do now with those people. So that's maybe more of the approach now.
Mm-hmm. So that was a really rich discussion already, but I still would like to ask if there are more questions from the audience that came up in your mind. That's the moment to think about it, if you want to ask something special to those 4 fascinating musicians. Or do you have questions among yourselves?
I really feel good that I could know how you felt. Also how you felt for the Ignaz's generation. It's really...
I like to say we don't have to worry too much. I think there is still more improvised music and free jazz in the world than ever before nowadays.
Yeah.
Look around. Everybody in Berlin likes to play and improvise. There are many groups, and it's not just Berlin, it's everywhere, so far as I know.
Just one question. Do you feel...
A positive statement in the end.
Good. Yeah. I thought maybe you felt overwhelming or something. It's like, okay, positive feeling, then that's good.
It's true, I think.
Yeah, nowadays it's funny game when I'm in Berlin. It's always funny game to count how much concerts per day on echtzeitmusik.
It's 11 tonight. I counted before, including
I
us.
counted once more than 20, around 20. I count once.
Yeah, but that's at the same time I feel really great because always something new happens, new venue, new place.
Yeah.
I never heard, and that's really. I mean, at the same time, it's kind of the war of getting the audience, maybe. But
actually, I wanted the nice question, but I feel that so even it's like 15 concerts happening at the same time in Berlin. I never feel from Petersburg Art Space side like, we are really, of course we are worried about, we want that people come, of course, but we understand the situation, and I think it's really unique situation when the places not compete, they are like always together, and happy that in other places also great musicians playing, so. I like this in the scene.
Actually, there's a very funny moment about the Echtzeit website, actually, because it was started to avoid competition.
Oh,
yeah. Because the problem was in the early days that there was way less community and audience, and there was a problem if, let's say, Ausland had a night and what was this place, Raumschiff Zitrone and Labor would have a concert at the same night. That was a problem because then these 20 people would be divided up, and then I think it was Gregor who I think basically, or Kai, they came up with this idea, why don't we make a calendar so we can see when the others are playing, and then it was a logical step to make that public, but I think that's how the Echtzeit website basically started, to avoid competition.
No, wow, that's also the evolution of echtzeitmusik calendar. Now, I mean,
if I remember right, maybe, but it was like this, I think.
Does it work?
No, as you see, there's 11 concerts on every night now, so.
No competition. No.
No competition. Yeah. No.
It already doesn't matter, yeah.
But it's just, we see it. Okay. how it is.
But it also doesn't mean, I heard very often, like there's these nights where people are worried, oh, there's a lot on, and it's not necessarily, I heard that sometimes even if there's 11 concerts, then you ask the colleagues, how was your night? And they say, yeah, it was fine. And sometimes you have only 2 concerts and nobody comes out. So 11 concerts in Berlin doesn't mean no audience.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's true when you see this as an organizer that you are always kind of worried if people are going to show up or if they go to other venues, of course.
Yeah, for you, I guess.
The famous Mark, I don't think anybody will come tonight.
Once I went outside to scout audience, actually, for Sowieso.
Because he said you will never play again if you don't have audience.
No. He said, this is not good. I like your music, but this is not good for Sowieso. So, okay, I go outside and ask people.
I also remember having been the only guest at Loophole.
Oh, really?
And then, it's 10 years ago or so.
Okay.
But then it was also going out and there's the cinema and then getting people in from the cinema. I think it was for the 3rd set, then, actually.
Okay. Sometimes it works, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a really, really interesting discussion, really interesting talk with many aspects that you've been bringing up to this topic. Thank you very much, Ignaz, for proposing this, and thank you all for coming and joining this and to share your experiences.
Thank you.
I think what we've been talking about already connects pretty well to the next talk that we are preparing. As I said, it will be with Burkhard Beins. He came up with the idea to talk about networks of Echtzeitmusik, international networks. It's going to be called Echtzeitmusik and its international connectivity, and it is going to take place in the next June 16th. And I think it's quite some time, but you can write it down already in your calendars. We saw that it's also hard to only talk about this generational aspect, because it is only one thing which adds up to a very big thing of maybe also categorizing musicians and how they are coming together and how communities are built. The notion of or the aspect of internationality and of joining communities already was discussed today, and I'm happy to continue this next year. Then with Burkhard, we have as guests Angharad Davis from London, we have Maria Portugal, and we have Cédric Fermont, and they all have very strong experiences in Africa and Asia. Not all of them, but if we take them all together, experiences in Asia and Africa and in South America. So I'm sure this is also going to be very interesting. Thanks again for being here. Thanks a lot for coming to Exploratorium. Thanks a lot for joining our live stream, and see you next time again.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Sasha, greetings to St. Petersburg.
Yeah, hope to see you soon, guys.
Yeah, really.
Hope you can.
Can't you
come
try
soon.
via White Russia, maybe?
Oh.